The small mountain town of Pinecrest was nestled deep in the heart of a vast, snow-covered wilderness. It was a place where people knew each other by name, and life moved at a slower pace compared to the bustling cities far away. Winters here were always harsh, but this year, something felt different. The air carried an unusual chill and the sky had been overcast for days. Everyone could sense that a storm was coming. A big one. Sarah Mitchell had only lived in Pinecrest for 60 months. A nurse by profession, she had moved there seeking peace after leaving behind the chaos of city life. She loved her new job at the local clinic, where she worked tirelessly to care for the townsfolk. But tonight, as she drove home from an exhausting emergency shift, she couldn't shake off the feeling that danger lurked just around the corner. The weather forecasters had warned everyone to stay indoors. Record-breaking blizzard, they called it. Yet Sarah's shift had run late, and she had no choice but to brave the worsening conditions. Her old car sputtered along the icy road, its headlights cutting through the swirling flakes of snow. Visibility was almost non-existent, with the wind howling like a wild animal and the snow piling up faster than the plows could clear it. As Sarah navigated the treacherous route, she noticed something odd, a faint glimmer of light flickering near the edge of the forest. At first, she thought it might be a trick of the storm, but curiosity got the better of her. Pulling over cautiously, she stepped out of her car into the biting cold. The wind stung her cheeks and the snow crunched under her boots as she made her way toward the source of the light. It didn't take long for her to realize what she was looking at. A car, half buried in snow, its headlights still on but dimming, rapidly. Peering inside, Sarah's heart sank. There, slumped against the steering wheel, was a young woman. She looked pale, her lips tinged blue, and her breathing was shallow. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a blanket, was a tiny bundle. Clearly a newborn baby. Without wasting a second, Sarah opened the car door and gently shook the woman awake. "Hey, can you hear me?" she called out urgently. The woman stirred, weakly, her eyes fluttering open. Please. Help," she whispered hoarsely before drifting back into semi-consciousness. Sarah's mind raced. This was bad. Really bad. Both the woman and the baby were showing signs of hypothermia, and staying in the freezing car any longer would be fatal. But calling for help wasn't an option. The phone signal was non-existent in this remote area, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. They were completely cut off. Taking a deep breath, Sarah sprang into action. First, she checked the baby. Miraculously, the little one seemed stable, though clearly chilled to the bone. Wrapping the infant even more securely in the blanket, she carefully lifted the tiny bundle into her arms. Then, turning her attention to the mother, Sarah tried to rouse her again. "We need to move," she said firmly, knowing time was running out. "Can you walk?" The woman nodded weakly, though her movements were sluggish and uncoordinated. With great effort, Sarah helped her out of the car and onto her feet. Supporting her weight, she guided her a few steps forward, testing whether she could manage. It was slow going, but they had no other choice. As they stood there amidst the raging storm, Sarah quickly assessed their options. Staying put meant certain death, but attempting to reach safety was equally risky. Then she remembered something. A cabin. About a mile down the road, tucked away in the woods, there was an old hunting cabin that locals occasionally used during emergencies. It wasn't much, but it offered shelter, warmth, and maybe even some firewood left behind by previous visitors. With renewed determination, Sarah tightened her grip on the baby and steadied the young mother. "We're going to make it," she promised, though she wasn't entirely sure if she believed her own words. One step at a time, they began their perilous trek through the snowstorm. Each step felt like an eternity. The wind whipped furiously around them, threatening to knock them off balance. Snow clung to their clothes, weighing them down, while the frigid air burned their lungs with every labored breath. Sarah kept talking, partly to keep herself focused and partly to reassure the woman, whose strength seemed to wane with every passing moment. "I'm Sarah, by the way," she shouted over the roar of the storm. "What's your name?" "Emily," came the faint reply. "Well, Emily, we're getting closer. Just hold on a little longer." Despite the dire situation, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of the human spirit. Here they were, two strangers brought together by fate, fighting against all odds to survive. And then there was the baby, the innocent little soul depending entirely on them. That thought alone fueled Sarah's resolve. She wouldn't let anything happen to them. Not on her watch. After what felt like hours but was likely less than one, they finally spotted the outline of the cabin through the curtain of falling snow. Relief washed over Sarah as she pushed open the creaky wooden door. Inside, the space was cramped and musty, but it provided much-needed protection from the elements. A dusty fireplace stood against one wall, and sure enough, a pile of dry logs lay stacked nearby. Using skills she hadn't practiced since childhood camping trips, Sarah managed to start a fire. The warmth spread slowly, chasing away the biting cold. She settled Emily and the baby close to the flames, wrapping them in whatever blankets she could find in her car. As the storm raged outside, the three of them huddled together, clinging to hope and the fragile promise of survival. The fire crackled softly in the small, drafty cabin, casting flickering shadows on the wooden walls. The warmth was a welcome relief after hours of battling the unforgiving storm outside. Sarah knelt beside Emily and the baby, her hands trembling, slightly from exhaustion, but steady with purpose. She knew they weren't out of danger yet. Hypothermia could still claim them if she didn't act quickly and carefully. Emily lay propped against a pile of blankets, her face pale and drawn. Her breathing had steadied somewhat, but she was still weak, her body shivering uncontrollably despite the growing heat from the fire. Sarah gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, can you hear me?" she asked softly, her voice firm, but kind. Emily's eyes fluttered open, though they seemed distant as though she were struggling to focus. Yes, she murmured, her words barely audible over the howling wind that seeped through the cracks in the cabin's walls. "You're safe now," Sarah reassured her, leaning closer so Emily could see her face clearly. "We made it to shelter. You and your baby are going to be okay." At the mention of her baby, Emily's gaze shifted downward to the tiny bundle cradled in Sarah's arms. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reached out a shaky hand to touch the infant's cheek. "Liam," she whispered hoarsely. Is he all right?" Sarah nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "He's strong, Emily. He's holding on. But we need to keep him warm. And you too." With practiced care, Sarah adjusted the blanket around Liam, ensuring he was snug and secure. Then, turning back to Emily, she began rubbing her arms briskly to generate more warmth. "You've got to stay awake, okay? Talk to me. Tell me about Liam. How old is he?" Emily hesitated for a moment, her voice raspy but filled with pride. "He's 3 weeks old," she said, her lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. "My husband, Daniel, he's overseas right now, deployed with the army. We were supposed to start our lives here together when he comes back." Her voice trailed off and her expression darkened. Sarah noticed the change immediately. "What happened tonight, Emily? Why were you out there alone in this storm?" Emily sighed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I went to visit my mom in the next town over. She hasn't been feeling well and I wanted to check on her before the storm hit. I thought I'd have time to get home safely, but..." Her voice broke and she shook her head. "I underestimated how bad it would get. My car broke down miles away from anywhere. I tried calling for help, but there was no signal. I didn't know what else to do." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for the young mother. She couldn't imagine the fear Emily must have felt, stranded in the middle of nowhere with a newborn baby. Yet there was also something remarkable about her, a quiet strength that refused to give up, even in the face of such overwhelming odds. "Hey," Sarah said gently, placing a comforting hand on Emily's arm. "You did everything you could. You kept Liam safe until help came. You saved him. That's what matters most." Emily looked at Sarah, her eyes filled with gratitude mixed with guilt. "But I wouldn't have made it without you," she admitted quietly. If you hadn't found it, Sarah shook her head firmly. Don't think like that. We're here now and we're going to make sure both of you pull through. Okay? Just focus on staying awake and keeping warm. Over the next hour, Sarah worked tirelessly to stabilize Emily and Liam. She used her own scarf to wrap around Emily's neck, providing an extra layer of insulation against the cold. When Emily's teeth began chattering uncontrollably, Sarah encouraged her to sip water from a bottle she'd brought along in her car. Hydration was crucial. Dehydration only made hypothermia worse. Meanwhile, Sarah kept a close eye on Liam. Though he remained quiet, his tiny chest rose and fell steadily beneath the blanket. Every few minutes, Sarah checked his temperature by pressing her fingers lightly against his forehead. His skin was cool but not dangerously cold, not anymore. She breathed a sigh of relief each time she confirmed he was still stable. As the storm raged on outside, Sarah tried to distract Emily from their dire situation. She shared stories about her life in the city, describing the chaos of working in a busy hospital and the reasons she'd decided to move to Pinecrest. In turn, Emily talked about her dreams for Liam's future. She spoke of wanting to raise him in a place where he could grow up surrounded by nature, free from the noise and stress of urban living. Their conversation helped pass the time, but it also deepened the bond forming between them. Despite being strangers just hours earlier, they now relied on each other completely. For Emily, Sarah represented hope, a lifeline in the midst of despair. And for Sarah, helping Emily reignited a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she'd been missing since moving to the small town. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The wind continued to howl, rattling the cabins, windows, and sending drafts of icy air through the gaps in the walls. Sarah added more logs to the fire, knowing they needed to conserve its warmth for as long as possible. She glanced at her watch, estimating how much longer they might have to wait before rescue teams could reach them. It was impossible to say. The snowfall was relentless and roads were likely impassable. Despite the uncertainty, Sarah refused to let fear take hold. Instead, she focused on the present moment, doing whatever she could to keep Emily and Liam comfortable. She sang lullabies softly to Liam, her voice soothing and calm. Occasionally, Emily joined in, humming along weakly but determinedly. Together, they created a fragile cocoon of safety within the battered walls of the cabin. Finally, just as dawn began to break, the storm started to subside. The wind died down, and the relentless snowfall slowed to a gentle flurry. Through the frosted window, Sarah spotted the first rays of sunlight piercing through the clouds. Hope surged within her. If the weather continued to improve, rescuers would soon be able to reach them. Sure enough, less than an hour later, the distant rumble of engines broke the silence. Sarah rushed to the door, throwing it open to reveal a team of emergency responders, trudging through the deep snow toward the cabin. Relief washed over her as she waved them inside, explaining the situation in rapid, concise sentences. The medics wasted no time. They assessed Emily and Liam, wrapping them in thermal blankets, and preparing them for transport to the nearest hospital. As they carried Emily and Liam out of the cabin, Sarah followed closely behind, unwilling to leave their side until she was certain they were in good hands. Before climbing into the ambulance, Emily turned to Sarah, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I'll never forget what you did for us." Sarah smiled, her own eyes misty. "Take care of yourself and Liam, okay? You're stronger than you think." As the ambulance disappeared into the distance, Sarah stood alone in the crisp morning air, watching until it was out of sight. She felt drained but fulfilled, knowing she had made a difference. What had started as a routine drive home had turned into a night of courage, compassion, and connection, a night that would change all their lives forever. The days following the storm passed in a blur for Sarah. After ensuring Emily and Liam were safely loaded into the ambulance, she had returned to her car, exhausted, but unable to shake the feeling of connection she'd formed with the young mother and her baby. She replayed the events of that night over and over in her mind, the icy wind biting at her skin, the weight of Liam in her arms, the desperate determination in Emily's eyes. It wasn't just an act of survival. It was something deeper, a moment of humanity that transcended mere chance. When Sarah finally arrived home later that morning, she collapsed onto her couch, still wearing her snow-soaked clothes. Sleep eluded her. Instead, her thoughts kept drifting, back to Emily and Liam. Were they doing okay? Had they reached the hospital safely? Would Liam recover fully from the ordeal? These questions lingered in her mind like shadows refusing to fade. By mid-afternoon, Sarah decided she couldn't wait any longer. She called the hospital where the ambulance had taken them, identifying herself as the nurse who had helped them during the storm. The receptionist transferred her call to the pediatric ward, where a kind-sounding nurse confirmed that both Emily and Liam were stable and recovering well. "They're incredibly lucky," the nurse said warmly. "If you hadn't found them, when you did..." Sarah didn't need to hear the rest. She already knew how close they had come to tragedy. Still, hearing the reassurance gave her some peace of mind. Before hanging up, she asked if she could visit them once visiting hours resumed. The nurse agreed, adding that Emily had mentioned wanting to thank her personally. 2 days later, Sarah walked through the automatic doors of the hospital, her heart pounding with anticipation. She carried a small bouquet of flowers and a stuffed teddy bear for Liam, unsure if such gestures were appropriate but wanting to do something thoughtful nonetheless. As she approached the room number the nurse had given her, she hesitated for a moment outside the door. What would Emily say? Would she even remember her clearly after everything that had happened? Pushing her doubts aside, Sarah knocked gently and stepped inside. The sight that greeted her filled her with relief and joy. Emily sat propped up in bed, looking much healthier than she had in the cabin. Her cheeks had regained their color, and her eyes sparkled with gratitude. Beside her, cradled in her arms, was Liam, wrapped snugly in a soft blue blanket. He looked tiny and perfect, his little chest rising and falling steadily as he slept. "Sarah," Emily exclaimed, her face lighting up with recognition. "You came!" "Of course I did," Sarah replied, smiling as she set the flowers and teddy bear on the bedside table. "How are you both feeling?" "We're doing so much better thanks to you," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to thank you enough. You saved our lives." Sarah waved off the praise modestly. "I just did what anyone would have done." But deep down she knew it wasn't entirely true. Not everyone would have braved the storm or pushed themselves to the limits to help strangers in need. Yet sitting there in the warmth of the hospital, room surrounded by the hum of monitors and the faint scent of antiseptic, Sarah realized this wasn't just about survival. It was about connection. Helping Emily and Liam had reignited something within her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. As they talked, Emily shared more about her life. She explained how difficult it had been raising Liam alone while her husband, Daniel, was deployed overseas. "It's hard being apart from him," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "But we talk every chance we get. He's counting down the days until he can come home." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching for Emily. Being a new mother was challenging enough without the added stress of separation and uncertainty. Yet despite everything, Emily radiated strength and resilience. There was a quiet determination in her eyes, a refusal to let fear or hardship break her spirit. In turn, Sarah opened up about her own struggles. She spoke candidly about why she had left the city, how the relentless pace of urban life had left her feeling burnt out and disconnected. Moving to Pinecrest had been her attempt to rediscover herself, to find meaning beyond the chaos of endless shifts and overcrowded hospitals. But lately she had begun to wonder if she'd made the right decision. Was it selfish to leave behind a place where she could make such a difference? Hearing Sarah's words, Emily reached out and placed a gentle hand on hers. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be," she said earnestly. "Look at what you've already done here. You saved me and Liam. That's not something everyone can say." Her words struck a chord deep within Sarah. For the first time in months, she felt a renewed sense of belonging, not just to Pinecrest, but to the people who lived there. This town, with all its quirks and challenges, had given her an opportunity to truly matter. And Emily, with her unwavering gratitude and openness, had shown her the power of human connection. Over the next hour, their conversation flowed effortlessly, covering everything from parenting tips to favorite books. They laughed, together, sharing lighthearted stories to balance the heaviness of recent events. At one point, Liam stirred in Emily's arms, letting out a soft coo that made them both smile. Sarah leaned closer, marveling at how peaceful he looked. "He's beautiful," she whispered, her voice full of admiration. "He really is," Emily agreed, gazing down at her son with pure love. Then, after a pause, she added, "You know, Sarah, I feel like, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like we were meant to meet, like fate brought us together for a reason." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. She had felt it too, that inexplicable sense of destiny woven into the fabric of their encounter. "Maybe it's because we needed each other," she suggested softly. "You needed someone to help you through the storm, and maybe I needed a reminder of why I became a nurse in the first place." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Well, whatever the reason, I'm glad it happened. You'll always be part of our story, Sarah. Always." Those words stayed with Sarah long after she left the hospital that day. Driving home, she replayed them in her mind, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that helping Emily and Liam hadn't just changed their lives, it had changed hers too. In saving them, she had rediscovered a piece of herself she thought she'd lost. The bond between Sarah and Emily continued to grow in the weeks that followed. Once Emily and Liam were discharged from the hospital, Sarah visited them regularly at their cozy apartment on the outskirts of Pinecrest. Each visit felt like reuniting with an old friend, rather than catching up with someone she'd met under extraordinary circumstances. They cooked meals together, laughed over cups of tea, and marveled at Liam's rapid growth. During one such visit, Emily surprised Sarah by presenting her with a handmade scrapbook. Inside were photos of Liam, notes from their time in the cabin, and newspaper clippings about Sarah's heroic actions during the storm. "This is for you," Emily said shyly. "I wanted you to have something to remember us by." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she flipped through the pages. "Emily, this is incredible," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you." "It's the least I can do," Emily replied with a grin. "Besides, I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. Maybe you'll even become Liam's godmother someday." The idea took Sarah by surprise, but the more she thought about it, the more it felt right. Becoming part of Emily and Liam's family wasn't just a possibility, it was a privilege she cherished deeply. As winter gave way to spring, Sarah found herself embracing life in Pinecrest more fully than ever before. She started volunteering at community events, organizing workshops on emergency preparedness, and mentoring young nurses at the clinic. Her newfound confidence spilled over into every aspect of her life, inspiring those around her to step up and make a difference. Through it all, Sarah remained grateful, not just for the storm that had brought her and Emily together, but for the lessons it had taught her about courage, compassion, and the enduring power of human connection. What had started as a harrowing night in the wilderness had blossomed into a friendship that would last a lifetime, proving that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge to guide the way forward. As the seasons changed and snow gave way to the vibrant greens of spring, Sarah's life in Pinecrest began to feel fuller and more meaningful than ever before. Her bond with Emily and Liam had blossomed into something truly special, becoming a cornerstone of her daily routine. Visits to their cozy apartment on the edge of town became a cherished part of her week. Each time she walked through their door, she was greeted by Liam's infectious giggles and Emily's warm smile. It wasn't long before Sarah found herself taking on a role that went far beyond friendship. She had become a second mother figure to Liam. Emily often joked about how much easier parenting felt with Sarah around. "You're practically his godmother already," she'd say, laughing as Sarah rocked Liam to sleep or helped him take his first wobbly steps. And while Sarah initially brushed off the idea, it began to feel less like a joke and more like destiny. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together in the backyard watching Liam chase after dandelion fluff floating in the breeze, Emily turned to Sarah with an earnest expression. "Sarah," she began, her tone serious but tinged with excitement. "Daniel will be home soon. He'll finally get to meet you, the person who saved our lives. I want him to know how much you mean to us, to me and Liam." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected this moment, to be acknowledged so deeply by someone whose life she'd only briefly intersected. "Emily, I don't need thanks," she replied softly. "Just knowing you're both okay is enough for me." But Emily shook her head firmly. "No, it's not just about saying thank you. You've done so much more than save us. You've been here every step of the way since that night. You've supported us, cared for us, and made our family stronger. We wouldn't be where we are today without you." Her words struck a chord deep within Sarah. For years she had questioned whether her decision to leave the city and move to Pinecrest was the right one. Had she abandoned the fast-paced world of urban nursing too soon? Was she making a difference here in this quiet little town? But now, sitting under the golden sunlight, with Liam squealing happily nearby, and Emily looking at her with such genuine gratitude, Sarah realized the answer was clear. She had found her purpose. Not in the chaos of crowded hospitals, but in the quiet moments of connection and care that defined life in Pinecrest. When Daniel finally returned from deployment, Sarah was nervous about meeting him. What if he didn't see her the way Emily did? What if he thought she was overstepping by being so involved in their lives? Her fears melted away the moment she met him. Daniel was kind, humble, and endlessly grateful. During their first meeting, he pulled Sarah aside and spoke from the heart. "I can never repay you for what you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Emily told me everything. How you risked your life to save hers and Liam's. You gave us a second chance, and now, seeing how close you've become to them, it means the world to me." Sarah blinked back tears, overwhelmed by his sincerity. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she insisted. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Daniel countered gently. "Not everyone would have. That's why we want you to officially be part of our family. Will you be Liam's godmother?" The request caught her off guard, though it shouldn't have. Emily had hinted at it before, but hearing it directly from Daniel made it real. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she nodded, unable to speak. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling she hadn't experienced since moving to Pinecrest. This wasn't just a title, it was a promise to stand by Emily, Daniel, and Liam through whatever challenges life might throw their way. With Sarah officially part of their family, the bond between them grew even stronger. She attended Liam's milestones, his first birthday, his first words, his first clumsy attempts at walking, as if they were her own child's achievements. Emily and Daniel often joked that Liam preferred Sarah's company to theirs, given how eagerly he reached out for her whenever she visited. But there was no jealousy, only love and laughter shared among the four of them. Inspired by the experience, Sarah decided to channel her energy into helping others in Pinecrest prepare for emergencies. The storm that had brought her and Emily together had exposed vulnerabilities in the community. Many residents lacked basic knowledge about surviving extreme weather conditions. With Emily's encouragement, Sarah organized workshops at the local community center, teaching people how to recognize signs of hypothermia, pack emergency kits, and navigate treacherous terrain during storms. At first, turnout was modest. A handful of curious neighbors showed up, eager to learn but unsure of what to expect. But word quickly spread about Sarah's passion and expertise. Soon the workshops were packed, with attendees ranging from young parents to elderly couples. Sarah used stories from her own experiences, including the night she saved Emily and Liam, to illustrate the importance of preparation and quick thinking. Her message resonated deeply, inspiring many to take action. One attendee, a retired school teacher named Margaret, approached Sarah after a particularly impactful session. "You've inspired me to do more," she said earnestly. "I want to help others too." Maybe I can volunteer at the clinic or assist with these workshops. Sarah beamed, thrilled to see her efforts ripple outward. That's wonderful, she replied. Every bit helps. Together we can make sure no one has to face a storm alone. Meanwhile, Emily also underwent a transformation. Surviving the blizzard had awakened a desire within her to give back to the community that had supported her during her darkest hour. She began volunteering at the clinic where Sarah worked, assisting with administrative tasks and offering comfort to patients. Though she lacked formal medical training, her warmth and empathy made her invaluable to the staff and visitors alike. Working alongside Emily brought Sarah immense pride. Watching her friend blossom into a confident, compassionate contributor to the community reminded her of the resilience they had both shown that fateful night. They often reminisced about their journey, marveling at how far they'd come. You know, Emily said one evening as they sipped tea together, I think the storm changed me in ways I didn't realize at first. Before, I was so focused on just getting by, on surviving until Daniel came home. But now, I feel like I'm living. Really living. Sarah smiled, nodding in agreement. I know exactly what you mean. Helping you and Liam reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place. It's not just about saving lives. It's about connecting with people, being there for them when they need it most. Their conversation drifted naturally to plans for the future. Emily expressed her dream of starting a support group for military families in Pinecrest, providing a safe space for spouses and children dealing with the challenges of deployment. Sarah immediately offered to help, promising to use her connections in the community to gather resources and volunteers. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the room, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The storm, that had once threatened to destroy lives, had instead created something beautiful, a tapestry of friendship, resilience, and hope. Together, she and Emily had transformed adversity into opportunity, proving that even in the harshest conditions, human kindness could shine brightest. And as Liam toddled over to them, clutching his favorite stuffed bear, Sarah knew one thing. For certain, their story was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side, forever bound by the night that changed their lives forever. The months rolled by, and the bond between Sarah, Emily, Daniel, and Liam only grew stronger. Pinecrest, once a quiet town where everyone kept to themselves, had transformed into a place of unity and purpose, thanks in no small part to the efforts of Sarah and Emily. Their shared mission to help others prepare for emergencies had sparked a ripple effect throughout the community. Neighbors who barely knew each other before now gathered regularly at workshops, sharing stories, skills, and laughter. The storm that had nearly claimed 2 lives had instead brought people together, creating a network of support and resilience. 1. Crisp autumn evening, the town held its annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of gratitude and community spirit. This year, however, there was an added significance. The festival organizers had decided to honor local heroes, and Sarah's name was at the top of the list. When she received the invitation in the mail, her initial reaction was disbelief. Me? A hero? She muttered to herself, shaking her head as she placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. But Emily wouldn't hear any objections. Of course you're a hero, she exclaimed when Sarah mentioned it during one of their visits. You saved my life, Liam's life, and inspired so many others. You deserve this. Despite her protests, Sarah agreed to attend the ceremony. She didn't do it for recognition or applause. She did it because Emily insisted and because she knew how much it meant to her friend. On the night of the event, Sarah stood backstage, clutching a glass of water and trying to calm her nerves. The large tent buzzed with excitement as townsfolk mingled, laughing and chatting over plates of homemade pies and steaming cups of cider. When the MC called her name, Sarah stepped forward hesitantly, her cheeks flushing as polite applause turned into enthusiastic cheers. As she made her way to the stage, she scanned the crowd and spotted Emily sitting near the front row, holding Liam on her lap. Beside them sat Daniel, clapping proudly. Their smiles gave her courage, and she took a deep breath before accepting the plaque engraved with words of gratitude. Thank you, Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. I'm not sure what to say. I never thought of myself as a hero. To me, I was just doing what anyone would have done, helping someone in need. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But if there's one thing I've learned from everything that's happened, it's that we're all stronger when we come together. That storm taught us how fragile life can be, but it also showed us the power of kindness, courage, and connection. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning heartfelt nods and murmurs of agreement. When she finished speaking, the applause was thunderous, echoing through the tent like a warm embrace. As Sarah stepped down from the stage, Emily rushed over, tears streaming down her face. "You were amazing," she said, hugging Sarah tightly. "I'm so proud of you." Sarah hugged her back, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "None of this would have happened without you," she whispered. "You and Liam changed my life too." That evening marked a turning point, not just for Sarah, but for the entire community. Inspired by her speech, several residents approached her afterward, eager to learn more about volunteering and organizing future initiatives. Margaret, the retired schoolteacher who had attended Sarah's first workshop, announced that she was starting a mentorship program for young mothers in Pinecrest. Others pledged to donate supplies or offer their expertise in areas like first aid and disaster response. Emily's dream of creating a support group for military families also came to fruition. With Sarah's help, they secured funding from local businesses and recruited volunteers to lead sessions on coping strategies, financial planning, and mental health awareness. The group quickly became a lifeline for spouses and children navigating the challenges of deployment, offering a safe space to share struggles and triumphs. For Sarah, watching these projects take shape filled her with immense pride. Moving to Pinecrest had been a leap of faith, but now she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Every day brought new opportunities to make a difference, to heal wounds, build bridges, and strengthen the fabric of the community she had grown to love. As winter approached once again, bringing with it memories of the fateful blizzard, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that terrifying night. She remembered the fear, the desperation, and the overwhelming sense of responsibility she'd felt while trudging through the snow with Emily and Liam. Yet those same emotions had given way to something far greater: hope, friendship, and a renewed sense of purpose. On a chilly December evening, Sarah hosted a small gathering at her home to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the storm. Emily, Daniel, and Liam were there, along with a few close friends and neighbors who had played key roles in the community's transformation. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the delicious aroma of roasted chestnuts and mulled wine. As they sat around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and reminiscing about the past year, Emily turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that night?" she asked softly. Sarah considered the question for a moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I think about how lucky I am that we did. Look at everything that's come from it, the friendships, the projects, the way this town has grown closer. It's like that storm wasn't just a test of survival. It was a reminder of how interconnected we all are." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And look at Liam," she added, glancing affectionately at her son, who was happily playing with his toys on the rug. "He's thriving because of you, because of all of you." Daniel raised his mug in a toast. "To second chances," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion. "And to the people who remind us that even in the darkest storms, there's always light." Everyone echoed the sentiment, clinking their glasses together in a moment of shared gratitude. As Sarah looked around the room at the smiling faces, the warmth of the fire, and the joy in Liam's laughter, she felt a profound sense of peace. The storm may have been unpredictable, even cruel, but it had also been a catalyst for change. It had brought strangers together, forged unbreakable bonds, and reminded everyone of the strength found in unity. Later that night, as the guests departed and the house grew quiet, Sarah tucked Liam into bed for the evening. He was asleep almost instantly, his tiny hand clutching the stuffed bear she had given him months ago. Kissing his forehead gently, she whispered, "Good night, little guy. Sweet dreams." As she turned off the light and closed the door behind her, Sarah realized that her journey wasn't just about saving lives, it was about creating them, nurturing them, and ensuring they thrived. The storm had been a beginning, not an end. And though the road ahead might hold challenges, she faced it with confidence, knowing she wasn't alone. In the end, Sarah, Emily, Daniel, and Liam weren't just survivors of the storm. They were proof that even in humanity's darkest moments, hope could emerge victorious. Their story was a testament to the enduring power of compassion, resilience, and love. And as long as they stood together, no storm, no matter how fierce, could ever tear them apart.